Hey guys, it's Joy, your favorite podcast host for Unchained Supply Chain podcast. I have with me today our friend Robert, and we're actually going to talk about how supply chain has evolved over these years and resiliency in supply chain, especially given uncertain times right now in the market and what we have going on, and the use of AI and how AI has evolved in this process and how it's contributing now to the network, the supply chain network of what they're doing today. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Robert. Robert, hi. How are you?
Hi. Good. Happy to be here.
Good. So I know that you've got a lot of experience in supply chain. You're like the guru, the Jedi Master, I guess you could say, of supply chain. In my opinion, but that's just me. I don't want to, I'm just saying. But yeah, you have a lot of experience in supply chain. So I thought it would be great to have you here today so that we could just kind of have a talk. Because, I mean, we are in a really uncomfortable, I guess people have been uncomfortable for several years now, but this is really uncomfortable given just the changing climate that's changing every single day. And I know that people are really struggling to try to figure out how to be resilient during these times. And I'm sure you've weathered a lot of storms in the experience that you have. And I'd just love to hear about what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, this is definitely some unprecedented times. I think when I talk to clients and, other executives in the industry or industry professionals, one of the common themes is disruption is now commonplace, and I'm in the camp that resilience. It's like driving by a car wreck. You want to stop and look, but you kind of numb to it after you've seen a few of them. And resilience is kind of like that because it's a word that means something different to everybody. But the reality and what underpins that is every organization, regardless of the industry, is prone to disruption. And so the concept is, I like, when I talk to clients, I like using disruption proofing the business, insulating it from external or internal shocks. But the idea of resiliency and how that's achieved to maintain a competitive advantage is certainly top of mind for everybody, especially right now with the geopolitical tensions, trade wars, economic uncertainty, consumer purchasing power, that's somewhat unpredictable, inflation. So a lot of companies are facing a lot of different challenges. And then, to the conversation of AI, you layer in all of the technology advancements and pressures to adopt AI and other technologies to help create resiliency and or improve productivity, performance, any number of things that technology lends itself to. It's an interesting time. I think what will happen over the next 5 to 10 years will largely be predicated on what we see in the next year or two.
Okay. That's good. That's a lot. But it's a lot right now. I mean, there's just so much. I mean, I've been in supply chain for a long time myself, but not in times like this where we're just in uncharted waters. And I know that there is immense pressure, like you said, to become more digitized, bring on more technology. But with the current state of where we are in, like you said, geopolitical and all that, how hard is it? How hard are you seeing any issues with people integrating new AI technology while still trying to, I guess, navigate these uncertain times? And is it more of a give and take, or are you seeing more companies trying to digitize or less, or what are you currently seeing?
Well, so I think you have to look at this kind of in a tiered perspective.
Perfect.
The companies that are farthest along in the AI or digital transformation journey are typically your large global organizations.
Okay.
They have the capital funding, they have the infrastructure, and to some degree the level of sophistication within their digital ecosystem to go through the testing and the exploration of dynamic digital capabilities.
Okay.
You get into middle market or some of your smaller companies, they're definitely lagging behind. And I'm an avid reader. I read a lot of market intelligence and, listen to a lot of my peers and the insights that we gain from practical experience. And So I think there's a widening gap. The consensus is that if you want to compete and you want to have resiliency, which extends beyond supply chain, in my opinion, it's organizational
Yeah.
resiliency,
Yes.
then AI will be the commodity of the future that will help achieve that. Companies that are already using it have seen 30% improvements in productivity. Um, they've had better capabilities for managing data in real time to make strategic decisions. Other companies are still kind of looking at what are my options for AI beyond ChatGPT or Copilot or some of the things that are
Yeah.
commonplace. And then manufacturing, to be quite honest with you, is one of the biggest industry sectors, and they've been at this really for a number of years, even before the release of ChatGPT with Industry 4.0, right? So you have
Okay.
the Internet of Things, machine learning. I mean, in some instances, even early adoption of virtual reality capabilities for training and upskilling the workforce. Um, so that's kind of a long-winded answer to say what I can tell you from a recent MIT study was they surveyed a lot of global organizations. 98% of executives say that AI and digitization of the supply chain is an imperative to achieving a strategic advantage and navigating uncertainty. How that adoption and the path and acceleration and where it's being implemented starts to vary a little bit based on the different business units within a company. So, for example, real quick, like marketing, sales, IT, very early adopters, much more further down the path when it comes to use cases. Supply chain manufacturing kind of sits underneath that. And then there's parts of the
Yeah.
business that are still trying to determine if it has an application. For example, legal, right? Or even
Right.
HR. So I do see a lot of interest. And then there's obviously also the dialogue around, is it hype or is it going to stick? And that's debatable depending on on where you sit, right?
Yeah, I that you bring up an important point there with is it hyper, is it going to stick? And I think, it's kind of like in my opinion, I'm seeing it like as if everybody's going ham on this, as if same thing. And I say ham, going bananas, whatever,
Right.
on this AI adventure, similar to how we are with approaching sustainability.
Hmm.
And so this, the drive to be carbon neutral with these companies, especially these large companies, like you're saying, almost their digitization is the same. They're putting that much emphasis in it. Now, obviously, sustainability is completely different from, say, AI supply chain management in a sense.
Hmm.
But yeah, I wonder if, a few years from now, if it's going to be as big as it is now. I mean, because it seems as though what we're doing is we're using it as initial tools to help us to understand where the gaps are, or
Hmm.
where can we improve, or where can we do this, or where can we do that. But is there any this is the AI helping, I guess, for instance, to help any type of supply chain negotiations better, or is it more being implemented, say, on the continuous improvement side, where they're trying to really get a handle on inventory, or what are you seeing there?
But that's a great question. So when you're looking to fund investments in technologies, AI included, um, especially given the volatility and, to some degree, the burden and financial impact that organizations have encountered over the last 12 to 18 months, you know, many executives want to know there's an ROI. So you brought up inventory, for example. So AI and in combination with predictive analytics, digital twins, simulation models, is very much accelerated because it helps reduce working capital, controls inventory. AI can use historical data, synthesize large amounts of data much faster than a human can, obviously. And so there could be automated internal triggers that help with replenishment, manufacturing, production planning, inventory controls. So, and all of that, I say that because at the end of that, there's in many cases, a definitive ROI or return on investment.
Right.
In other scenarios, it is as much about the working capital cost savings, but improving productivity to help employees do their jobs better. And if I have a more productive workforce that is more efficient, then the thought process there is it reduces my operating overhead. So, for example, in talking with a CFO just a couple of weeks ago, they implemented some AI tools to do back office invoice management, which has significant. This is where you start to tread lightly because the workforce is sensitive to AI because they think it's going to take jobs. I'm a firm
Yes.
believer that AI is there to enhance humans do the work better, and ultimately be more effective at their jobs.
Yeah, that was going to actually be my next question. So I'm
Yeah.
glad that you're bringing your segue into that, because I mean that's the thing. That's where we wonder: is it just a fad, or is it going to actually stick? Because people are, you're absolutely right. People are afraid of the AI and what it's doing. I mean, the good news is that AI right now can't replace trades.
Right.
So we still have that shortage of skilled labor in the trades area, for construction, all that. But AI, in terms of, in my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong or what your thoughts are on this, but it seems as though if you have employees that are able to operate more efficiently, they're happier.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
They're happier.
Right.
And the other caveat with that is you can take employees and the knowledge of employees, especially as the skills deficit and the workforce demographics are significantly changing with the aging population, and you can put them in new roles, right? So again, I like to say that AI works when you apply human intelligence and emotional intelligence. The example I was using from a procurement standpoint and automating the back office, one of the challenges is although AI is reducing the manual intervention points, the human intuitiveness or the human nature of us all is, do we trust AI enough and to be error free? And so even though we're seeing companies use it in different parts of the business, there's still a hesitancy there. One, to embrace it completely. Number two is to trust the outputs.
So the investment in AI is significant investment that we're seeing. And the larger companies, as you said, are looking to take those on. But you also brought up an important point that it's also the human impact of it. So it doesn't just work itself. Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Like AI requires some type of human, feedback or something feeding it, right? So the employees also get an opportunity to be part of that too. I'm going to assume that they're part of these are major events that they're doing, especially for sourcing, when they're sourcing and vetting these companies for it. I mean, there is still a human aspect that goes into the AI. Is that, am I understanding that correctly from what you're saying?
Yes, that's a fair assessment. So,
Okay.
I think what companies are trying to do with AI is democratize it to where it creates the speed at which we do business. And
Okay.
you brought up in your earlier question, which I may have not fully answered, was negotiation. So one area where AI is being actively looked at and tested is in supplier relationship management, or negotiating or sourcing new suppliers. And you can't remove the human element of that because there's always going to be a need for human interaction between suppliers. But what it does do is it definitely, again, has the ability to intuitively learn, but it can take large amounts of data, and it can take and assess a large supplier base very quickly to determine, like, what is their business solvency, what is their risk, are they compliant with, regulatory requirements and mandates. And so that process, because I've done strategic sourcing events before, that manual process of vetting suppliers, which could take, weeks in some instances, is now reduced.
Okay.
So, and then, obviously AI is helping to create documentation and things of that nature. I had a mentor when I first got into this, and this was not where I thought I would be, 30 plus years later. But, even when I started, and this is well before the technology that we have today, I had a mentor tell me, I don't care how much supply chain or logistics or distribution, manufacturing, whatever the case is, how far it advances with technology. It is an industry that's always going to be dependent on a person being involved for moving something from point A to point B.
Yes.
And I still think that holds true today. The only difference is that the marriage between what we do functionally in supply chain and what AI and other digital capabilities bring to the table is a necessity for sustaining the business and sustaining the competitive advantage of organizations in a global market.
Okay. No, that's great. Because that was going to be my next segue also too, is that, supply chain, especially in the United States, I would say in the US, supplier relationship management is critical. It's pivotal to, doing business. I would say, especially in the US, I've noticed, we do more relationship based, business with people, as opposed to some places where they're just looking at the finite detail, where, we would pay maybe a few bucks more because we know we're going to get treated better. We can rely on these products, X, Y, Z. And so, that's a good point that you bring up, that the AI is not going to replace that. I mean, it's like I had an interview the other day. I was just talking about this. I had an interview the other day with an AI assistant. That was really strange. I don't think that you would be able to replicate something like that for a supplier relationship to a sense. So it's still going to be a highly personal relationship that you have with your suppliers. It's so the good news is that it's not going to replace all of us. Right. But no, that's a good point that we brought up with the sourcing, because we know that AI is doing inventory control and helping to really understand where your vulnerabilities are, especially in uncertain times like this, where everybody's looking at that final dollar and looking at where we're at. But where is it, I guess, so how, besides that, where else could it be applied in supply chain that would benefit companies during these times?
Well, one of the areas that has been accelerated really over the last 8 to 10 months, given the uncertainty and volatility of the external environment, is in demand forecasting.
Okay.
So, demand forecasting is a part of the business that has always had a large fingerprint by humans, helping to manage sales and operations planning, or sales and inventory operations planning, or advanced business process planning. But AI capabilities, again, using historical data, predictive analytics to forecast and really pivot much more quickly to external factors. So that's one area that it's being applied. We talked about the inventory. Another area where it seems to be getting even more momentum is in supply chain risk management. So there's ways that it's being used to help organizations or individuals within supply chain make more informed strategic decisions using a number of different inputs.
Okay.
And that even goes back to the supplier relationships. And one of the things that I've seen, not to harp on that, but one of the things that I've seen that's important to understand is part of resiliency is moving from transactional relationships to more strategic alliances.
Right.
And so if I have and I'll just keep it simple, if I have a supplier base of 10, which is not typically the case, it's much more than that, and I'm looking at supply chain risk management and resiliency and accounting for potential disruptions, but I'm leaning into those, outsourced logistics partners, contract manufacturers, and vendors, the information flow and the speed of that information flow and how we're able to digest that and make quick decisions all plays to the risk mitigation. And AI is underscoring that,
okay,
as well as other things like, again, machine learning and some of the things that have been around for a while. The last thing I would like to hit on as far as AI, because we've talked a lot about, I think, the generative AI component and where it fits in, but manufacturing is probably going to be the biggest area where you're going to see advanced AI capabilities. And you're seeing that to some extent already with smart robots. The other piece of that too is even in warehousing and distribution is, autonomous picking machines. China's way ahead of us in many respects in this space, where they have almost a complete distribution center that has sensors and QR codes on the floor, and they have autonomous robots and that map to pick product and move product from inbound to outbound. So again, I think those robotic and mobility solutions backed by AI is really going to drive the ultimate future state of supply chain. And whether an organization and a supply chain can be resilient and adapt and adjust to changing external environments.
Well, and that's another good point you bring up, is that it seems to make that understanding that risk of transition, right? It makes it a little bit more clear at a quicker rate. Is basically what we're getting out of this, is that, and so it's helping companies to understand where their exposure is, and it's not just an inventory management tool. It's that's the other reason why I'm glad you're here, because you're showing us that it's just, people think AI and supply chain, they're thinking inventory management, but it does so many other different things to be able to it's almost the analytics of where your spend, what your spend is, your past, what you spent over the years on certain services versus today, and how to compare those, which is definitely, very good information that you can have readily available when you're trying to negotiate pricing with a supplier, especially something that's a volume based. So, that's really, that's important. So those analytics are there. They're building. Is that how I understand it? I'm understanding correctly that this is how it's being employed as well.
Yeah. Again, we went through an era of big data, and data has gotten bigger. And honestly, the adoption or deployment of AI. So when you look at the AI kind of journey map, there's the exploratory component, which is, hey, I'm going to test a number of different applications that are either embedded in my existing system, or that are bolt-ons to my current platform. So there's the exploratory in terms of, is it a fit? Does it achieve the results that we want? Once that is determined, and you move to scale and you move to full implementation, then you have the exploitation component. You can put that in the blooper. Because the outcome of AI, even in the analytics space, is all about improving the ability for organizations of varying sizes to make smart decisions, making the right decisions at the right times under the right circumstances, and eliminating, and as somebody who's been in supply chain for over 30 years, eliminating that, call it gut feeling or intuition of, well, I've done this, I've lived through a number of different experiences, so I know what the right thing to do is, and leaning more into objective data-based decision making that mitigates the risk exposure of organizations, but ultimately stays aligned with the core principles of maintaining a client-centric and consumer focus in terms of how we move product or how we engage with clients at all levels of the organization.
Well, that's good, and we're almost going to be finishing up on time, but I'm really glad that you're here, and I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me today. And as far as supply chain goes, I mean, the resiliency that we need to have during these times. I mean, what are some pointers or situation based or whatnot that you can give to people out there that are sitting here saying, I don't know what to do? And maybe, I know we all got to weather a storm, right?
Right.
I guess it's more of how do you weather it, or what are some good points that you've carried on with your, over the years over the years that you've been in supply chain, and then obviously coming into the new era of technology and everything else.
I would sum it up, as I do with a lot of our clients, I would sum it up to say, invest in people, invest in human capital. Okay. Crisis management, disruption response, digital transformation, adoption, change management, all the things that sit under that umbrella. At the core of that is still individuals, the workforce, and upskilling them, equipping them with the knowledge, the skills, and the opportunities to learn and expand, even within the digital space, is imperative. Number two is, I think, build in a framework, and I've seen companies doing this today, where they are developing governance boards that are strictly focused on, some are with our current situation, some are calling them tariff task force, but some companies are looking at it much more holistically to say, we have a dedicated governance board and we're going to drive the initiatives that are all focused on achieving resiliency and absorbing disruption. So, financial resiliency, supply chain resiliency, human capital resiliency, these are all interlinked in terms of strategic initiatives that companies deploy. And then the last one is, don't be afraid to push yourself out of your comfort zone. You got to create an environment, in my opinion, where people are willing to take risks, sometimes make decisions that without having all of the information. But that's how innovation's been born, is, trial and error, taking risks, learning what works, learning what doesn't work, and then hopefully, getting to a point where you have an open, innovative kind of mindset and environment. So then the companies that are able to achieve that not only are going to be more resilient, but are going to outpace and outgrow their competition.
That's great. And I like how you put that emphasis on the human capital part, right? Because, you can have all these different machines that are going to do everything, but your biggest asset, in my opinion, is your people.
Right.
Because they're going to right the ship. So if all technology fails, you have a set of people that are still going to be able to run the company if we don't have these tools. So it's important that you do say that, because a lot of people, like we said earlier, are worried that AI is going to take away from the workforce, but we still need the people aspect, those assets of people. And I don't want to refer to them as tangible items, but to me, my biggest asset with my business is my people. And so, right. So it's great that you say during these times to do investments and invest in your people, and that's important to also note that, with what you're bringing up is that, during these times is, a lot of companies scale back on everything, on training, on all these things. And it sounds like you're saying, no, we need to do the investment while we're slow, while we're down, to kind of, to grow our team so that we're ready to hit the ground running. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, I think that's a great summation. I was having a conversation with a CFO of a private equity a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about his workforce. So in 2 years, he was saying 30% of his workforce is going to be nearing retirement age. Ooh. So one of the things that keeps him up at night is, how do I backfill that level of tenured experience? And, other conversations I have with COOs, chief supply chain officers, people within the HR arena, supply chain professionals, I don't think anybody has lost sight of the necessity and the value of having a talented workforce underneath you. But the reality is that, let's be honest, manufacturing jobs for millennials and the newer generation, they're not attracted to it, But this is the flip side of the conversation, where AI and automation and things of that nature could attract more of the younger generation, because rather than physically moving products or doing things of that nature, they grew up playing video games, and now they're going to be more in a kind of that type of controller role, monitoring systems and AI capabilities and mobility options. So I think it's just how we control the narrative and how leaders of companies communicate to their workforce, the balance of investing in people, giving them the opportunities to succeed, creating new opportunities for them to do other meaningful things within the organization, while in parallel integrating and implementing some of these AI and digital technologies.
That's, and I know we're almost out of time, but that's a great point that you also brought up, was that, I'm a logistics professional, so my expertise is in super heavy lift and transport. So I move the really big stuff, and we have a huge talent gap. And to bring somebody in and to try to take from here and implant in there, 20 years of moving stuff and just knowing things, and knowing stuff and trial and error and all that, they're looking at a lot of it is that, logistics, especially in the logistics that I do, is grossly archaic. I mean, thank God for the pandemic, or we would still be working off of paper bill of ladings for ocean carriers. I mean, I'd still be signing 3 original bills, stamping them and sending them off to get my charters, So, and that's that helped us move away from that. But you're right when you bring that up, is that we need to be attracting new talent, and in doing so, being so transactional, more on the not on the digitized side, but we're not attracting people that way. So that's another thing, great point that you bring up, is that AI, and the digitization of what we're doing in supply chain is a great way to attract new talent, in my opinion, because, a lot of them they don't understand that personal relationship. So you got to get them in the door and get them here somehow. Right. And so if you attract them using the digital component, I think that you bring up a great point about that too, that, and especially in uncertain times where we have a gap in the labor, in the talent pool. So, I really appreciate that. That's a great point that you bring up, because again, you're only as strong as your people, right? So,
Right.
And you have to, and it's true that there's this gap where people are retiring, and how do you fill that? And when do you start to fill that? And so it's a really, it's kind of a guessing game and somewhat in there, but with AI and the moving towards sustainability, obviously, and this is definitely not a sustainability conversation.
Right.
That's a different day, because we can go for 30 more minutes on that. But no, I think that definitely brings up a good point that, you mentioned, is that, you can attract new talent, I don't want to say younger, but greener talent, coming out into the workforce better by being more digitized or having better technology. And that's how I'm understanding correctly, is that?
Yeah. I mean, you talked about logistics. I mean, that's been the bulk of my career as well. And, when you talk about AI, machine learning, and those types of applications, rerouting and route optimization becomes much more a technological event rather than a human event. However, there's still a number of other aspects of the business within logistics, distribution, manufacturing, whatever, that still require that human touch, that interaction.
Exactly.
Right? I don't think, and this is my personal opinion, I don't think we'll ever live in an age of the Jetsons where we're going to have autonomous vehicles and people flying around on drones and whatnot.
It's terrifying.
I say all of that to say that we're still going to have drivers. They're going to still need somebody that's going to be checking them in, dispatching them, making sure that they're staying safe. And listen, I don't want to go too far off the rails here, but that's the other benefit in supply chain, especially on the operations side, is it is an investment in taking care of the workforce, because where other AI applications or mobility solutions are being applied is in those more traditional manually repetitive roles. So if I'm taking a human out of that, I'm creating a safer work environment, and I'm helping people live longer, healthier lives. So again, I think it's a way that organizations and leaders in supply chain control the narrative, educate the workforce, and then start to use these technologies, I call them dynamic digital capabilities, to attract a new generation of workers that's going to make all of us better in the future.
And thank you so much for that, because that's a great summary there. We talked about a lot in 35 minutes or 38 minutes, wherever we're at. But
Right.
no, I just really appreciate you coming on today, and it's been great working with you and learning from you. I've learned a lot from this conversation today, and I hopefully want to have you back again when we can discuss sustainability or something else, supply chain related. I mean, I was going to say, it's so funny when you say that the technology can give you a route. Well, that's great, but with moving really big cargo, you still have to have that human aspect that has to actually physically go out and run the route. And so it's so neat how, though, that little piece of technology does help in terms of what we do on the logistics side for moving massive cargo. So, because the route is obviously the one thing that'll put you dead in the water if you don't do it right. So no, it's been great having you on the show today, Robert. I really appreciate it, and we'll have to definitely do it again and cover another supply chain topic.
I'm always happy to come back, and thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for listening to OGGN, the world's largest and most listened to podcast network for the oil and energy industry. If you like this show, leave us a review and then go to OGGN.com to learn about all our other shows. And don't forget to sign up for our weekly newsletter. This show has been a production of the Oil and Gas Global Network.